Number 99 is Portrait of Sor Juana Inez de la Cruz. The artist is Miguel Cabrera, 1750, and this is oil on canvas. So we're going to watch this video that really does a good job describing why she's considered a scholar, all about the context, and then we'll come back to the PowerPoint.
Juana Ramirez de Azbaje sat before a panel of prestigious theologians, jurists, and mathematicians. The Viceroy of New Spain had invited them to test the young woman's knowledge by posing the most difficult questions they could muster. But Juana successfully answered every challenge, from complicated equations to philosophical queries. Observers would later liken the scene to a royal galleon fending off a few canoes. The woman who faced this interrogation was born in the mid-17th century. At that time, Mexico had been a Spanish colony for over a century, leading to a complex and stratified class system. Juana's maternal grandparents were born in Spain, making them members of Mexico's most esteemed class. But Juana was born out of wedlock, and her father, a Spanish military captain, left her mother, Doña Isabel, to raise Juana and her sisters alone. Fortunately, her grandfather's moderate means ensured the family a comfortable existence, and Doña Isabel set a strong example for her daughters, successfully managing one of her father's two estates, despite her illiteracy and the misogyny of the time. It was perhaps this precedent that inspired Juana's lifelong confidence. At age 3, she secretly followed her older sister to school. When she later learned that higher education was open only to men, she begged her mother to let her attend in disguise. Her request denied, Juana found solace in her grandfather's private library. By early adolescence, she had mastered philosophical debate, Latin, and the Aztec language, Nahuatl. Juana's precocious intellect attracted attention from the royal court in Mexico City, and when she was 16, the viceroy and his wife took her in as their lady-in-waiting. Here, her plays and poems alternately dazzled and outraged the court. Her provocative poem, Foolish Men, infamously criticized sexist double standards, decrying how men corrupt women while blaming them for immorality. Despite its controversy, her work still inspired adoration and numerous proposals. But Juana was more interested in knowledge than marriage. And in the patriarchal society of the time, there was only one place she could find it. The church, while still under the zealous influence of the Spanish Inquisition, would allow Juana to retain her independence and respectability while remaining unmarried. At age 20, she entered the Hieronymite convent of Santa Paula and took on her new name, Sor Juana Inez de la Cruz. For years, Sor Juana was considered a prized treasure of the church. She wrote dramas, comedies, and treatises on philosophy and mathematics, in addition to religious music and poetry. She accrued a massive library and was visited by many prominent scholars. While serving as the convent's treasurer and archivist, she also protected the livelihoods of her niece and sisters from men who tried to exploit them. But her outspokenness ultimately brought her into conflict with her benefactors. In 1690, a bishop published Sor Juana's private critique of a respected sermon. In the publication, he admonished Sor Juana to devote herself to prayer rather than debate. She replied that God would not have given women intellect if he did not want them to use it. The exchange caught the attention of the conservative Archbishop of Mexico. Slowly, Sor Juana was stripped of her prestige, forced to sell her books and give up writing. Furious at this censorship, but unwilling to leave the church, she bitterly renewed her vows. In her last act of defiance, she signed them, I, the worst of all, in her own blood. Deprived of scholarship, Sor Juana threw herself into charity work, and in 1695, she died of an illness she contracted while nursing her sisters. Today, Sor Juana has been recognized as the first feminist in the Americas. She's the subject of countless documentaries, novels, and operas, and appears on Mexico's 200 peso banknote. In the words of Nobel laureate Octavio Paz, it is not enough to say that Sor Juana's work is a product of history. We must add that history is also a product of her work.
over a lot of the context. So just kind of go back over. She's a literary figure, author of books, poems, theater. She was a lady in waiting, which means she attended to the queen. And then she was friends, maybe romantic with the viceroy's wife because of exotic poetry that was found that she had written to her. Overall, she did not want to get married. You just become the old lady with the cats. So instead of getting married, the only other option she had was to become a nun. This is a quote by her: "Who has forbidden women to engage in private and individual studies? Have they not a rational soul as men do? I have this inclination to study, and if it is evil, I am not the one who formed me thus. I was born with it, and with it I shall die." I do not study in order to write, nor far less in order to teach, which would be boundless arrogance in me, but simply to see whether by studying I may become less ignorant. This is my answer, and these are my feelings. So she writes this famous text defending the right of women to study and write, and then she comes under pressure from the church hierarchy to abandon her studies. So it was a controversial letter of a church official that got her in trouble, censored. They removed her library. She was not allowed to write or read and spent the rest of her life caring for the sick. This is a Netflix show that's about her life. She has really become an icon for feminist and LGBT movements. All right, and then the video talked about she contracted the plague and she dies, age 46. So this painting was made after she has died. Posthumously made portraits. Posthumously means made after the death of the person. Just like Gottfried Lindauer painted Tamati Wakanene after Tamati Wakanene had already died. That is a posthumously painted portrait. All right. Also, 1750, this was made during the Age of the Enlightenment. So the Age of the Enlightenment was an intellectual and philosophical movement, dominated the world of ideas in Europe during 17th and 18th centuries. It was closely associated with scientists and inventors, but artists and writers also played major roles. They helped spread Enlightenment concepts, inspired others to think rationally. It's all about the intellectual learning. So there is a painter, Joseph Wright of Derby. He is going to be the artist that we study when we talk about this Age of Enlightenment. It's actually the first or the very beginning of the next unit of Unit 4. The Age of Enlightenment was an intellectual and philosophical movement, dominated the world of ideas in Europe during 17th and 18th century. So it's all about this idea of learning and intellectual, philosophical ideas. We're going to hear about this also kind of with the School of Athens by Raphael. All right. How is this not a typical portrait of the time of Sir Juana Inés de la Cruz? This is really considered a groundbreaking portrait. Women are typically portrayed how you see on the left and the right, right? They're kind of holding these delicate little fans. Obviously, their dress is very intricate. She is holding a delicate bird dressed in decorative fabrics. So this is Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz's portrait is groundbreaking because of depictions of scholars, typically just of men. We have one exception, Peter Paul Rubens, who we're going to study when we talk about Baroque. He did this painting of Saint Teresa, who we're going to learn about when we hear about Bernini, the sculpture of Saint Teresa. All right, so this is a glorification of a Creole intellectual. That is the function of the portrait. So how has the artist Cabrera portrayed her? Where does his inspiration come from? So here's a painting that Titian did of Saint Jerome, and here's one on the left that Caravaggio did of Saint Jerome, right? So they both are holding these open books because they're both a scholar. So she is portrayed as an intellectual because she's holding this open books. She's sitting in her library. She has her quills. The artist Cabrera, he took inspiration from how Saint Jerome is portrayed. Oh, an escudo. This is what this medallion or this badge that she is wearing. An escudo is a nun's badge, medallion, or a painting worn below the neck. Even in the cartoon video, it depicted her wearing an escudo. So on the escudo, right, you can see a picture here. This is Gabriel, the angel, coming in to tell Mary that what's going to happen, right? She's going to have God's son, Jesus. She's going to have a baby. So that is called the Annunciation. We're going to study this Annunciation painting pretty soon. All right, so it's kind of like we are the angel Gabriel coming in and interrupting the nun while she is reading, just like angel Gabriel is coming in and interrupting Mary while she is reading. All right, so we've already talked about this. She's in a library in the act of reading, surrounded by quills. He's depicted her religious devotion because of her escudo. She's holding these rosary beads and she's wearing the nun's attire. Overall, she lived at a time when intellectual pursuits by women were discouraged and often prohibited. And we are done.